So I'm going to be doing a lot of talking in this video, and if you get annoyed by that, I will put a timestamp down in the description below so that you can skip all that and skip straight to the demo. But what this video is about is I took this very cleanly and beautifully laid out breadboard and I sort of made a module out of it. So this is the classic two-pole state variable filter that you might find in an Oberheim SEM, but instead of using CA3080s or LM13700s, it uses discrete transistors. So these are a matched NPN pair and these are a matched PNP pair to make the OTA, and then there are the two OTAs to make the second order differential equation that makes the state variable filter. And the reason for the purple is I've been using Osh Park, and purple is, as far as I know, the only color you can easily get from them. And it's an American-made PCB service. I think they actually manufacture in America, if the WordPress sites that I read about that are correct. And it's not that much more expensive than the Chinese service that I've been using. So, so that's that. And to talk about some of the features of this module, how it's laid out is I've got two audio inputs and two associated attenuators for those. I really like to have the attenuators on my filters. That's kind of an essential feature for me, so I can dial in the appropriate overdrive behavior. And I only have one modulation input with its associated attenuator. You know, it's all a matter of taste and functionality. You know, whether you want to have two CV inputs, you know, or two audio inputs, or two of both, or whatever. But you need to have at least one of each, I guess. So, and then I also have controls for frequency and cutoff, and low band and high pass output. So, astute watchers will note that some state variable filters have a notch output, so I elected not to do that because I kind of like to just use an external mixer and sort of mix and match the frequency responses and sort of fade in the filter responses that I like. So having a hard-coded mix of the high and low pass output, I don't know, it just, in my system with the setup I've got going on, it wasn't really that important to me. And so, speaking of other features, the exponential current source is made of these two transistors, and they're discrete and they're not matched, and there's no temperature compensation resistor and there's no high frequency compensation. So all that matters when this thing is self-oscillating and tracking 1 volt per octave, which it can self-oscillate, and I'll demo that later. But you know, like if you're using this as a VCO, it will drift over time and stuff like that. So that's some stuff that can be added later, you know, on a different revision, if it you know, if the universe works out that way. And then I also add reverse power protection diodes on all my modules now, so that's what these diodes are on the top. And speaking of all my modules, here's two other filters that I made recently. It's kind of psychologically satisfying for me to see them all together like this, sort of a repetition on a theme. But they also have these diodes. So this is just the transistor ladder filter, just kind of an essential circuit, so just sort of boilerplate there. And this is sort of a clone of the Sequential Circuits Pro 1 filter. Sometime it might be nice to do an AS versus SEM 3320 comparison, because all I have to do is spend $50 on a SEM 3320 and pop this AS 3320 out and do a comparison. So that might be a cool thing to do in the future, but I'll probably upload a video about these two sometime. But this video is about this guy, so I think that's about all I wanted to say. So I will demo the frequency range by putting it into self-oscillation and putting the frequency at min and max and seeing what frequencies we can hit. Before I do the frequency range, I'll talk about the mechanical construction real quick. So I found these pots that I really like. They're real quality, and they have a nice resistance to the turn, and they're all panel mounted, so there's no wobbling or anything as you turn the knob. And I like D shaft because you can sort of put the knob cap in so that you get the appropriate angle at maximum and minimum of the control, and you know, once you set it, it's really solid and it's going to stay there. Set screw knobs kind of annoy me because sometimes they come loose, and that can be really annoying. And knurled knobs kind of annoy me because sometimes when you push the knob down, the way the knurling works is you don't get the exact right angle for the min and max, so that's why I use these D shaft knobs with these little caps. So that's that, and then obviously it's 2 layers with through hole, and then I have these standoffs to hold it together so you can't pull it apart. And I use these 2.54 millimeter or 0.1 inch pitch header connectors to electrically connect the boards together. So this is a 6 pin, this is a 4 pin, and it's skiff friendly. This capacitor is probably a little tall. I'm ordering shorter capacitors for these. But anyways, that's a little bit about the mechanics. To look at the self-oscillating waveforms in the frequency range, I've got the scope hooked up here. Right now it's connected to the bandpass output, and I've got everything maximally attenuated on the input, and I've got the resonance turned up at max. So there's a waveform from the bandpass output. As I change the frequency knob here, it changes that. So let's look at the minimum. So that's about 16 hertz on the minimum. There's the frequency counter, that's how I can tell that. And let's go to the maximum. So you can see that the amplitude is constant over frequency. That's a good thing. There's about 18.2 kilohertz there. So I was able to hit 20 kilohertz on the breadboard. I would chalk that difference up to component variation, and it would be a very easy thing to tune in if that's important. But let's do some more frequency sweeping. You can see there aren't any weird fluctuations in amplitude as I do that. So this is the bandpass output, and this is the low pass output. So there's a little bit of clipping on one side of the waveform there, and the high pass output has sort of a similar situation on the other side of the waveform. And sort of kind of a sawtooth thing going on there. So they're not as clean as the bandpass output. I may investigate that further and kind of see if I can dial that out, but those are the self-oscillating waveforms anyways. So I'll look at an actual signal from the VCO coming through this thing. So I've got a square wave coming in, and adjusting the cutoff frequency. Turn up the resonance a little bit. Turn it down so it'll trigger. Move my trigger up here. So I kind of like to check these out just to make sure, playing around with the trigger here, just to make sure that you know, the ringing on the resonance is nice and sinusoidal, and you know, there are no weird things coming from the power supply, and there are no supersonic oscillations and stuff like that. But it looks pretty clean. You know, as I sweep the cutoff frequency, I don't see anything unusual happening. And here's what minimum resonance looks like. That might be kind of interesting to take a look at. So that's kind of that response, very underdamped. It's maximum cutoff frequency, and then you can just filter it out. So So it looks pretty clean. I would give this the Dan seal of approval, which is worth a lot, I can tell you. So enough of this, let's actually listen to the thing. So to demo self-oscillation, I just have the filter sitting here with the resonance cranked to the max, and I've got the bandpass output hooked up to the VCA that's hooked up to the mixer and then going into the PC. So that is the setup. Start the recording here. So I've kind of got it roughly tracking to 1 volts per octave. I just tuned it by ear, so it's probably not going to be perfect, but here's a taste. So you can kind of hear it that octave. It's not really tracking very well, but I don't really hear that octave very often in music, so I think it's pretty acceptable as a VCO. And it's not temperature compensated, so you know, who knows if it's going to be in tune 10 minutes from now. But yeah, that's the bandpass output. Here's the low pass output. So, quite similar sounding, but you can hear that there is a little bit of fuzz on there because of that clipping, and the high pass output sounds very similar. So, you know, there's an audio frequency sweep. If your cat's listening, he probably just freaked out. But it's kind of fun to sort of overdrive these sine waves a little bit. Get you know, it kind of blends into a square. Excuse me, as you overdrive it. So, you know, it actually does work somewhat decently as an oscillator. I wouldn't want to use it as my main VCO in my system, but, you know, pretty cool. Hey, stop it! So in demo filtering, I'll just kind of fiddle around with the 2 oscillator patch and alternate between a square and sawtooth wave, and alternate between the different responses, and also I'll do some stuff dry and do some stuff with effects, because you know, it's arguable that both of those could be good to have in a demo. So, I don't know, just play around with it. So that's a notch right there. Wow.